moment. So tonight we're going to talk about dielectric barrier ionizer and the trademarked multi-cluster ionization. A lot of times there's been some misunderstanding, and I'm going to ask Nathan to come in at the end of this, if that's okay, because he's got some products he'll want to talk with you about. But I want you to know that this component that we're going to be talking about tonight, I think has been incredibly underrated. And what I mean by that is that when I brought it to the United States from Korea several years ago, I could have just said, this is it. We're going to get rid of everything else. This is the technology that we're going to use. I think tonight you're going to see that as a standalone component, the dielectric barrier ionizer outweighs a lot of the technologies that are out there. And I think including, yeah, thank you, Nathan. I think including the PCO technology, although it's a very good technology, and I think it's enhanced with the ionization processes that the dielectric barrier ionizer is creating. And we'll tell you a little bit about where that's going. But I want you to understand that one of the most affordable technologies that we have is this dielectric barrier ionizer. We've got small units that will do pretty good, pretty large areas, significantly less expensive than the PCO technology or the PCO and DBI technology together. So I just want to kind of lay the groundwork tonight by sharing with you a video that that I actually recorded. It may sound a little weird, but we've been doing this quite a bit, and I think it's pretty helpful. So I got a call actually from one of our members who was asking me about the difference between MCI, dielectric barrier ionizer technology, and PCO technology. And as I went back through it today and listened to it, it's about 14 minutes, so it's not a real short video, but I entitled it Where MCI Came From, because it's kind of the history of how we came about this. And you'll know that this is not something that's just brand new. All of a sudden, we decided to get into the air purification business. It actually goes back quite a ways. And so I want to just play this. It's actually him and me talking. And so a little odd, you'll be like a third wheel listening to a conversation that he and I had, but I think it'll be a good opportunity for you to hear how I approached this very question. Where in the world did this MCI trademark and this MCI technology actually, how did we get our hands on it? Where did it come from? And what do we intend to do with it? So let me show you this video. And then I want to talk about the testing tonight. And I want to talk about the spec sheet on some of the technologies that we're able to share with you tonight. So let me get this going here in just a second. I've got the sound on. And I'm assuming, Nathan, if you could give me a yes, you can see this, where MCI came from.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right. And I'm assuming you'll be able to hear it.
Most of the time, I was going to ask, what's the difference? Because most of the time they installed the air scrubber. And I was looking some stuff up. The difference between this one, as far as I can tell, is that it's a little cheaper, but it seems to be about the same.
So the air scrubber, is that the one from Active Tech?
I think so. It's been a while since, I don't really remember, to be honest.
Yeah, so Active Tech, just so you'll know, let me give you a little bit of history real quick, and then you'll know I know what I'm talking about. I actually got into the indoor air quality industry in 1996. And I was working with Alpine Industries. Alpine Industries were selling standalones. They weren't selling anything for the HVAC system. And then they sold to a company called EcoQuest International. And that was a multi-level marketing company, basically. And I was doing training for my downline. I had a pretty good sized organization. And the early 2000s, right after the turn of the century. And in 2002, EcoQuest bought the technology, the UV PCO technology from RGF, Ron Fink out of West Palm Beach. And RGF was manufacturing PCO technology, which is UV with a target plate technology. They were manufacturing and promoting that technology. It was a probe that actually went into the air conditioning system. So when EcoQuest bought it, they actually hired me and Dave Tupman, who's no longer with us, but and Alan Johnson, who was their chief technology officer, to develop training for a new division they wanted to start called Active Tech. And that was going to be their commercial division, and they were going to take the probes into the HVAC industry. And that was in about 2003 or 4. So we did training on the technology and the way it worked and how it was different from some of the others that was out there. RGF had a flat plate back then. They weren't using a broad spectrum UV lamp. They were just using a straight ozone lamp. And so Active Tech turned that around, changed it around a little bit. They were using a broad spectrum lamp. They used a quad metallic coating on the honeycomb. They created a honeycomb plate instead of a flat plate, which gave the UV more target space. And so it was producing more oxidizers, basically. And so that's how Active Tech started selling that probe. They decided, actually it was against it was just my opinion, but it was against my judgment that they should use the word air scrubber, because it doesn't really scrub the air, number one. And number two, air scrubber is an already known commodity in the mold world, mold restoration industry. I do training for mold assessors and mold remediators, and an air scrubber is an air filtration device with a HEPA filter on it. That's literally what an air scrubber is. And basically anybody in the restoration industry, if you said air scrubber, that's what they would think about. But anyway, Active Tech didn't agree, and they called it an air scrubber. And then they went bankrupt. EcoQuest went bankrupt, and their company was bought. Well, not their company. Their assets were bought by DBG Group, which is a financial services group, basically a venture capitalist in Dallas. And they created a company called Velara, which took the assets that EcoQuest was selling, and that's how they started continuing to sell their product. And that's kind of where Active Tech products came from. And as far as I know, that's probably still the same unit that you're using. It's an ultraviolet light, typically from 184 to 256 nanometers. It's a honeycomb plated target plate, which is what produces the PCO, photocatalytic oxidation, and amion track.
Yeah, that's what most people use that I've seen.
Yeah. So let me tell you what's happened. That particular device was created, like I said, around 2004, 2005. And what's happened in the industry since then is several different technologies, newer technologies have come about. That technology is still being used. And the broad spectrum plate, I can give you at least 5 different companies that are using exactly the same technology with the honeycomb. The difference between what they're doing and what we're doing is our probes are actually made by Green Tech Environmental in Johnson City or Gray, Tennessee. The man that started that company when EcoQuest sold their company and filed bankruptcy in 2007, 8, something like that. Alan Johnson, the one that I mentioned to you when we began training on the Active Tech product, he was their chief technology officer. He did not want to work for the new company, and so he started a company called Green Tech Environmental out of Johnson City. And that's who he started building, basically the same probes that Active Tech was building, except that he made some modifications on them. He is a ex-rocket scientist, so he's a real techno geek, and he knew that he could make some changes in that technology that would actually enhance the technology and make it better. And so he developed a ballast that it's a breathable ballast, so it doesn't wear out. He uses a 32,000 hour lamp instead of a 12,000 hours. So it's a 3-year lamp. And they used a quad metallic coating on the honeycomb, which actually produced more oxidizers. So Green Tech International, I was just giving the kind of the history of the unit that he's using and how it compares to the units that are being used and developed today. The Green Tech product, and I don't think I have one here, but this is what they're building, which is basically the honeycomb UV lamp, a technology most people are familiar with. What we did with that technology is let me ask you this first. Photocatalytic oxidation process, do you know what that's actually doing and how it works? It's not a passive technology, it's actually a proactive technology.
I know whenever I used to install it, the gist of it is basically like you just kind of have like something that's like a hydrogen peroxide type of stuff, and it cleans the air. That's all I really needed to know to tell the customers.
Okay. Well, what's actually being produced are called hydroxyls. Hydrogen peroxide is part of the process. And depending on how well you want to get down into the weeds on that, I agree with you. Most clients don't really care. They just want to know if it works. They don't care. They don't care if you're dealing with C2H2O1 or whatever. They don't really care about all the science behind all of that. But so you're correct. That's exactly what it's doing, is proactively sending oxidizers downstream to keep the ductwork system clean and also to keep the environment clean. One of the changes that we made with the way the technology was sold was that we knew that when you put, typically they were selling it, Active Tech was selling it with a probe on the supply side, plenum. And what they didn't tell people was that typically when the oxidizers are doing its job, there's not enough technology to get back around into the filter and come back and keep the A coil clean. It works great on everything supply side, downstream, into the environment, but there's not enough of technology left to actually keep the A coil clean. And so what we started training on was, let's put a probe, less expensive probe, but let's put a probe on the return plenum just to keep the A coil clean, and a probe on the supply side to actually go down into the house and keep the environment clean, or in the commercial building. And we've had a tremendous amount of success with that in terms of keeping the inner working parts of the HVAC system clean. My house is 20 years old. I had somebody service my machine. I have it serviced every year. I had a different guy service it a few years ago, and he couldn't believe it. He said it looked brand new on the inside. So I had to go through a training process and explain to him how and why. But anyway, the other thing that we realized was the probes work great, but not a lot of people, certainly when you get above the Mason-Dixon line, a lot of people don't run their air conditioning 24/7, and they don't have typically a two-stage system where the fan is constantly circulating the air. And so we also make that same exact technology for standalones. And we would say, here's a standalone that you could put into your house when your air conditioning system isn't running, it's still cleaning the air. So we built basically a line of products that include everything from something you put in your car all the way to casinos. We have dealt with large casino environments, so we do quite a bit of commercial work as well as residential work. But it's all built around those technologies. So that's the PCO story. Let me tell you what's happened in the last 7 or 8 years. So I was invited to do an indoor air quality training in Korea, South Korea, several years ago. Went to Seoul, and when I was there, I was actually brought under false pretenses. I found out that the reason they brought me out there was they wanted to talk with me about a new component that they were using in their casinos that did exactly the same as PCO technology, except that it wasn't a lamp. It was a transformer type of device that would actually produce the same type of ionization and the same type of hydroxyls, but it would produce it with a transformer instead of a lamp. And so you could get a 3-year replacement instead of a 1-year replacement like you typically do on the PCO. And you could cover a lot more area with a smaller device. So they introduced me to, and again, I'm going back 6 or 7, 8 years ago, they introduced me to this, which is called a dielectric barrier ionizer. It's a transformer that produces actually clustered ions and the same hydroxyl processes that happens with a a regular PCO technology. And it's small enough, you can see it's only 3.5 inches long. It's small enough that it can go into PTACs, it can go into a car unit where UV lights just can't. UV lights have to be pretty large and pretty intense for it to actually produce the hydroxyls. So this comes actually with a small, a socket. It's just a plug and play type of device.
That takes up way less space in the ducting.
Yeah, exactly.
Than
yeah.
UV light, and easier to change out, and has longer. The lifespan for UV lights is usually a year, like you're saying.
Right. Yeah, so when they showed this to me, here's my interesting story. I just love this. So when they showed this to me, they said, we want you to use this technology. We think it'll really work. And I said, okay, great. So I brought it back to Green Tech and I said, I want to put this with this. I want to put it together with this. And I want to see what happens doing testing and find out if it supercharges the unit, if it makes a better product. And they said, they did testing and they showed, I can show you the testing. They showed that it significantly increased the hydroxyl output, but they said, well, that's a nice device, but we do UV. That's what we do. So the next year I went back to Korea to do another training for them. And I took this with me and I said to them, I said, look, why don't we combine these two? I've already got the testing data to show that it's powerful. Let's just combine these two and we'll have a much better product. And they said, no. This is what we do. We don't do UV. So when I came back to the States, I said, okay, Green Tech, here's what you're going to do. I'm going to design a bracket for the top of your device. And this bracket, we're going to put this DBI cell in there and we're going to trademark it. And now you've got a unit that's going to be a lot more powerful than everything else that's out there. And so this is what we've been marketing as the Synergy Pure MCI trademarked technology. And we have the exclusive rights to this patented technology for the United States and for Canada. So that's what we do.
Oh, that's what we do. And that's how that came about. The interesting thing about the dielectric barrier ionizer is that it's so unique, it's not producing a straight ionization. If you think about a regular ionizer, either a needlepoint ionizer, either positive or negative. There's not a machine that produces both. You either have a negative needlepoint or you have a positive needlepoint. Now, there are products out there like GPS, Global Plasma Systems, that has both needles. If you look at their device, they have a positive and a negative needle, and they put it in an HVAC system in the plenum, and they flood the ductwork with negative ions and positive ions. Now, if you think about that, you don't have to think very hard about how much do they have to produce to actually leave any left over, because in some ways they're canceling each other out. Number one. So they produce a tremendous amount of ionization, which can be a problem in some cases, can produce static electricity and some other issues. But the other problem with straight needlepoint ionizer is that you have a line of sight basically, and when that ion leaves, as soon as it hits something, it's spent. So if you have a GPS unit or any kind of ionizer that's needlepoint at the supply plenum, even if you're producing a tremendous amount of ions, every time it takes a turn, a lot of those ions go away. By the time it gets to the supply register, a lot of those ions go away. And so the question is, how much of those are actually getting into the environment to make a difference? And the testing has shown that, in fact, they had a huge, gigantic lawsuit after COVID because of claims that were made on that ionization process, because it just doesn't do what some people were saying it does. So the difference is, instead of having a needle point and having both ions produced at the same time, the dielectric barrier ionizer, the way it's built, is it actually produces a clustered ion, positives and negatives together in basically a ball, And when it goes out, it will actually bounce around and it will discharge. Each of those ions will discharge, but you still have some left, so it's going to stay in the environment a long time, go through the supply registers, go into the environment, and help clean up the environment. So the point is that ionization is incredibly powerful. The clustered ion that's being produced is even more powerful, will last longer than a regular straight ion. It gets the same positive effect of changing the polarity of certain particles, allowing them to aggregate together so that they're larger, will drop out of the breathing range, all of the benefits of ionization, but it has the added benefit, believe it or not, of being strong enough to actually destroy microbes. And the first question that a lot of people ask about that, when you say, well, this ion is, because it's clustered, it's larger, it's a larger charge than just a single ion. So if you think about this, well, the first question a lot of people will ask is, well, if this gigantically charged ion, clustered ion, is out there and it's destroying microbes, what is it doing to my cells? Well, bottom line is our cells are a lot larger and it's doing nothing. It's just not doing anything to us. But the testing that's been done, and I want to show you our testing booklet, some of the cool stuff that's out there. You know that I'm all about giving you, not giving you a fish, but teaching you to fish. I'm going to give you a couple of resources and show you some stuff that you can do your own research if you want. But what you're going to find is that the clustered ion, the dielectric barrier ionizer by itself, does exactly the same thing to VOCs, to bacteria, to viruses, to mold, fungal contamination, to particulates, does exactly the same thing as PCO technology. And the cool thing is that it actually does more. Because you've got a clustered ion, you're producing a tremendous amount of positive and negative ions, where with a PCO technology, it's almost exclusively negative ions, which is good. I mean, it's great to have negative ions, no doubt about it. But it allows this clustered ion, because it's long lasting, it allows the hydroxyls to last longer. There are hydroxyl machines, by the way, where and they've been doing testing on them, where the hydroxyls don't even leave the machine. They're produced and they have such a short half-life that there's no way they even come out of the machine. With the addition of the clustered ion, the proof is, and the testing has shown, that those hydroxyls do last not only out of the machine, but actually in the environment. So let me show you a couple of things that I think will be impressive from a testing standpoint. And we have, several hundred pages of testing. But you can see this is our testing booklet. I just want to scroll down here, show you how organized this is. There's a little discussion about what MCI is and how it works, and the ion production and so forth. But if you keep scrolling down, you're going to see how this is a discussion about ozone and non-ozone UV, because a lot of folks ask about that. But this is categorized by contaminants. Here's particulates. And there's testing here with TVOCs on the MCI technology, with cigarette smoke specifically. Samsung did tremendous amount of testing on this ion cluster, which is what they call it in Korea. Removal 98% of VOCs, 99% of airborne particulates. So there's some testing there. This Cincinnati test is actually on PCO technology. But then you come down here to biologicals, and you've got Korean bacterial seminar test. There's just all kinds of stuff in here from from Korea and from Asia on testing on the MCI. There's antiviral efficacy, MCI, influenza, and H1N1. A lot of cool stuff here. There's a test on Stachybotrys. There's Korean testing research on SARS-CoV-2 testing. Everyone wants to know about that. That's there. And then if you keep going down, there's VOCs. So it's going to deal with VOCs just like the PCO technology does. And then there's some supplemental testings here on the Salmonella and MRSA, methicillin-resistant staph. A lot of really cool stuff on dust. There's a dust mite letter. That's something that you'll find interesting. But Anyway, this is a lot of testing data that's out there. And I think what's really cool is that we've been able to show through regular clinical testing that this product really, really works. So this is one of the products that I wanted to talk about a little bit tonight, and that's the Mini. This is actually a product that is can go into the HVAC system, into the supply side or the return side. It actually has a place for 4 DBI cells, so it can actually handle some light commercial work as well. But if you scroll down, you're going to see again, we're recommending that we put one in the supply and one in the return. That's what this is. And this does not have PCO. This is all about just the dielectric barrier ionizer. Here's the sizing formula, the return plenum. We suggest 1 mini with 2 on the A coil side, and then you can do it with just 1 if you want for every 400 to 800 CFMs or 2 tons of air conditioning system on the supply side. The reason you want more on the return plenum is because you want to keep those A coil clean, and that'll help do that. And by the way, the expense of this product is considerably less than the cost of the PCO technology or the PCO technology with this DBI technology. So what we're talking about is being able to split these technologies and utilize one or the other. And so if cost is a concern, this is one of the best ways to get the best bang for your buck in terms of dealing with odors, VOCs, bacteria, all of those sorts of things without having to spend a tremendous amount of money. One of the things that we talk a lot about, and you probably know this, but the sizing of the product always depends on a lot of factors. We don't talk about cubic footage or tonnage, except kind of a thumbnail. This is approximately the way we would deal with it. But obviously, if you've got a lot of kids, a lot of pets, a lot of carpeting, you might need to upgrade it to more DBI cells than just 1 or 2. And then here, of course, are the specs on that unit. All right, so what I wanted to show you then tonight, and I think what I'm going to do is, if you don't mind, Nathan, I may let you talk a little bit about these, but let me just go over here to BLS products for a minute and talk about some of these products that are just for the DBI technology. I guess maybe the first thing, before I do that, let me just open the floor and see if there are any questions or anything you want to add, or Skip, you want to add. I've been doing a lot of talking, my word, 40 minutes. But looks like Randall Smith has his hand raised. So let me see if I can get him on here. Skip, Nathan, anything you want to add?
Yeah, why is Doug talking about this today? Number one, it's not a replacement for removal of microbial materials from an indoor environment. We know that houses are much like hourglasses when it comes to polymicrobial amplification, and what grows, they just continue to pile up. And I say that loosely. Whatever starts on a wall ends up in the air. This technology, what does it do? It, number one, disrupts the cellular respiration or the life cycle of that organism. It disrupts cell membrane integrity. Therefore, that bacteria, that mold spore, can no longer reproduce in the presence of water. And then the multi-cluster aspect is you're adding a brick to each microbial. And so therefore, volumetric weight allows it, number one, if it's larger, it'll be easier filtered. Number two, it's going to fall out of the atmosphere. And once it falls out of the atmosphere, it's a risk mitigation process, whereby, ergo, there's less propensity to be breathing as much of it when you're walking around or spending time in an indoor environment. Now, it's going to land on surfaces, walls, behind a couch, on a coffee table. It still has to be clean. That's why regular cleaning it with good products, starting with a good HEPA vacuum, is very critical. But this really does reduce, it's a risk mitigation. And for all of our sensitized individuals, it's really a requirement. You know,
Yeah.
you got to, if somebody had a double knee replacement and you never gave them a walker or a pair of crutches, they wouldn't be able to get around too easily, right? So it's, what do you do with the patient? You give some assistance. That's exactly what this does. And I can attest to the effect. I've tested a lot of this technology, and I know, without getting into this, that companies that added this DBI cell to their technology, which I found to already be the most effective out there, made it infinitely more effective for the reasons that Doug talked about.
Well, and that's why we call this, to your point, that's why we call this an IAQ management program. It's constantly taking care of the contaminants in this environment. In fact, one of the tests, I didn't show you this, but one of the tests that I think is really cool is it shows when the technology is in an environment over a long period of time, it's going to keep that environment clean, because you know the air is so dynamic, it's changing constantly. You walk in from the outside, you're bringing all kinds of contaminants in. And the fact that you can create a cleaner, safer, healthier environment, and that's why we talk about it that way. You can do that from a management standpoint by having these technologies in place.
Yeah, Doug, isn't there something that, definition of clean air is the absence of contamination?
I think I've heard that before. Yeah,
There was somebody who was really wise who said that once. I just remember.
that's right. That's right. Randall, you had a comment.
Yes, a couple of questions. In fact, as far as I've got in my both return plenums, two different HVACs, got the Synergy Air, the HVAC probes in there now for both my systems, but already had, before I even heard of the NORMI stuff, I already had REMI halos on the supply side. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to replace at the replenishment, basically replace the guts every 2 years is what they say on that. Can you comment on the REMI Halo versus the BLS product, along this line? And then also the question of, there's different situations where bad attic problems with high humidity environment, it'd be really nice to have a kind of prevention thing going on there. I actually bought one, a Synergy Air Pure for my attic, but would that other device, I forgot what you call it just then, but we can put up to 4 in it with a fan on it.
Yeah.
Would that be a better thing for an attic?
Yes, yeah. Well, let me just say this, and I know a lot of people don't agree with me about this, Randall, but I don't like talking about other products, only because a lot of the guys out there are sue crazy. I don't know any other way to say that. And as soon as I say something bad about the RGF product or the REMI product, somebody's going to be on my case. So one of the things that I've tried to do is I've just tried to show the difference. If you look at our executive summary, and then we also have another spec sheet which actually shows how the Synergy Pure technology is advanced, and the things that we're doing versus a lot of the other technologies that are out there. It's not about a specific brand as much as it is the technology. For instance, I was just how I described the difference between a needle point ionizer and a multi-cluster ionizer. The REMI is a needle point ionizer. So now that you know what needle point ionizers do, that ought to be able to help you draw conclusions on the limitations of what that would be.
Yes.
If you're using a 12,000 hour lamp instead of a 36,000 hour lamp, now you're talking about replacing that lamp every year at least. And a lot of the technologies that are out there that are using 10,000, 12,000 hour lamps are being coated on the inside. And so they don't actually last more than about 7 months. So again, talking about the technology itself is kind of the way I feel most comfortable talking about that. To answer your question, we have Protect Airs, incredibly inexpensive right now. That would be a fantastic product for the attic.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if I may, Doug,
Or crawl spaces. Yeah,
yeah,
go ahead. Yeah.
in general, those who sell this technology, invariably, what are they selling? A benefit. By definition, are benefits, should they be measurable? Yes, they should. If a doctor prescribes, a calcium channel blocker or a blood pressure medication, if you take it correctly, a week later, your blood pressure should go down. Most of these companies do not have large independent data points. I will say, and I'm sure Doug, you would agree, all of them do something. Very few do a lot more than everything else that does something.
Yeah.
The combination of the BLS technology and where you're going with the BLS technology in combination with the DBI cell is probably the best that's on the planet. That's the Cadillac.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Now, Stan Moser asked a very important question. I love this, Stan. Thank you. It says higher RH, relative humidity, is better for PCO. Higher RH, relative humidity, is more effective for hydroxyls, correct? Well, sort of, kinda. The PCO technology, yes, it absolutely needs to have humidity. And that's why they don't do very well selling those in dry climates, because they do need a higher relative humidity. In fact, I think it was, I want to say Odorox, one of the hydroxyl machines recommends you put a bucket of water behind it as it's drawing a higher relative humidity so that it can create the PC or the radicals using humidity. That's a huge difference between PCO and dielectric barrier. Dielectric barrier is not dependent on relative humidity. It's going to produce the clustered ion regardless of the relative humidity. And I think that's an important aspect of what this technology does. And the thing that's cool about it to me is most all of the casinos in Korea, and that's a part of that country is very dry, but almost all of the casinos have, this is the technology they use, because it gets rid of the odor, it gets rid of they still smoke over there, by the way. Uh, but the odors, the nicotine, the gases, all the VOCs that are produced by cigarettes, all of the particulate, all of that is taken care of with this DBI technology, and that's all they have. In fact, if you come to the Academy, I was showing this off the other day, if you come to the Academy in our museum, where we have a lot of the different technology, a lot of the different products, on the very top, there's a DBI cell that's used in a casino, and the DBI that you see that's 3.5 inches long, I think these probes are probably 1.5 feet, and there's 8 of them. And that's what goes into a casino to deal with the contaminants. So anyway, that's the difference between PCO and DBI. And then Kenneth asked, what's your thoughts on hydrogen plasma cells from extreme microbial? One of the things that we're doing right now is we're looking at the EMT technology, extreme microbial technology. I think they've got a great product. I feel really good about that product. They're right now learning how to, we hope, retrofit their product with the addition of our DBI cells. So Kenneth, you're a little ahead of the curve, but in a couple of weeks, you're probably going to be hearing us talk about adding the EMT technology, extreme microbial technology, to our lineup out of Best Living Systems, and giving you the option to add the DBI cell to it. It's going to be a win-win, right, Skip?
Yes, sir.
It's going to be good.
Like I said earlier, they all do something. Some do a lot more than what others do. And even the ones that do a lot more are infinitely more efficacious with the DBI cell.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's going to be a powerful unit, and we're looking forward to getting that. So what's really cool about that, if you think about it, is having the ability to have, again, money isn't always the object, but it's almost always the object. The fact is that you've got DBI cells that are pretty inexpensive to use. You've got PCO technology kind of in the middle, and then you've got PCO and DBI on the top end. And you're going to have those choices. You're going to have those options. And that's why I wanted to talk about the dielectric barrier ionizer tonight, because you don't have to have PCO with it to actually produce a really, really good product. So I'm going to turn this over to you, Nathan, if you want to talk a little bit about these incredible machines you have behind you, and you can talk about which ones are dielectric barrier ionizer only, and they're really incredibly effective machines.
Yeah, the reason I chose these behind me was exactly for that reason. These are our main units that use the DBI cells, the dielectric barrier ionizers. I didn't put this behind me, but this is the one that you were showing earlier, what we call the mini, and it's really only mini in size. It's extremely powerful. Like from what you were saying, maybe we ought to change the name, but but yeah, you know, instead of the thing with the long PCO cell and the option to have 1 or 2 DBI cells next to it, this just uses DBI cells, and very easy to add or subtract them from here. Like Doug was saying, we recommend having one of these with 2 DBI cells on the supply side. That keeps your AC system, the A coils clean and everything. And then, I'm sorry, on the return side.
Yeah, return side, that's right.
And then basically you go through your sizing considerations for your house or your office and figure out how many DBI cells you'd like to put in here to cover your space effectively. And so there's some very helpful sizing considerations on the website. Not only, you know, I think this it's outstanding technology. It's also actually cheaper than if you compare the 24K unit that we have. It roughly compares to one of these with 3 DBI cells in it, and you'll find about a $300 difference in price. Also, the amount of replacement parts, you know, these things last a lot longer than UV lights do, and so you can replace these every couple, even maybe 3 years, instead of every year having to replace your UV light. So it's simpler maintenance as well. So there's
You know, the thing that's cool about that technology too, you're talking about two or three cells. That technology, you cannot overdrive the technology, which means you could put 4 in there and it's going to be a lot more effective. It produces a negligent amount of ozone, a little bit of ozone, but it's not enough to go on the supply side, not enough to go down the supply register and into the house. Unless you're especially sensitized to it, then you wouldn't want to use more than 1 or 2 of those cells. But you could easily put in 3 or 4 and it's just going to do a better job. You cannot overdrive it.
Great point. Thank you. Yeah. And that's one of the exciting things about these Protect Air units, you know, that I'm excited that more people are trying them now. And because we've had them, we put them on a good discount. And I think a lot of folks have been trying them out more. You probably can't see inside there, but there's 1 or 2 DBI cells in here. Every Protect Air is equipped to have up to 2 DBI cells. So if you buy one that has 1 in there, you can always buy another cell and open it and put the second one in, and it'll just plug and play. And
that's a nice heavy metal unit too. It's not plastic. It's that's why I was thinking it would really be good in an attic or crawl space.
Right. Yeah. Just bolt it to your underside of your crawl space, or inside your attic somewhere, and you basically forget about it, except you need a reminder to go check the filter from time to time.
Right, that's right.
That's what you need to do. The Breeze is another one that just has a single DBI cell in it. It's really good for just a single room, or maybe a college dorm room or something. And so it's just blowing that, the ions into your living space. Of course, the Chaos, it's kind of our bread and butter system, and it has PCO technology in it as well, and the DBI cell. So it's combining some of those with that synergy that Doug was talking about, the PCO and dielectric barrier ionizer together. Plus, it has a very good HEPA filter built in. So that's an excellent unit.
So that Breeze, I didn't want to talk a lot about pricing, but the retail price on that's around what, $300, I think, for the MCI Breeze. That is such a great little unit, and it'll cover easily a one-bedroom apartment. If there's just a couple of people living there, maybe even up to two-bedroom. But it's a really great little unit, and it's very, very inexpensive. And like you said, it's a 3-year replacement on the DBI cell. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
So.
neat, Doug, that once you understand the technologies, you can kind of look at the different machines and you can much better understand what value each one brings. So I really appreciate what you shared tonight.
Well, good. Thank you. Thank you. Zachary said, with the UV light technology, is it safe to say that it's ineffective? UV light is incredibly effective. The problem with UV light, UV, especially just the lamp itself, like if you put UV lights on your A coil, for instance, you've got two factors that you've got to deal with. One is proximity, how close it is to the microbes, because it only has a kill a range of a couple of inches around the light. And then the other one is exposure time. You've got to have it exposed to that microbe over a long period of time before it will actually kill it. So what I tell people that in an HVAC system at 2000 CFMs, the bugs are moving so fast that they don't even get a sunburn. The UV lamp itself is good and will keep the surfaces clean close to the lamp, but that's about it. So that's why they added the DBI, or that's why they added the target plate, typically TiO2, but that's why they added target plate so that they could get this photocatalytic oxidation process. In fact, I was reading recently that there are several, I thought was interesting, there's several buildings now in Beijing that they've painted with titanium dioxide and the sidewalks with titanium dioxide for the purpose of creating PCO outside to help keep the air clean. So, I think everybody knows this is not, it's not magic. It's just kind of nature's way of cleaning things. And I think the exciting thing is that because we've got kind of a unique trademark and we've got unique control over this particular component, we have a lot of opportunity to help people in a way that maybe other technologies can't. Make it affordable and it's always incredibly effective.
Yeah, everything you're talking about, Doug, it's about building performance enhancement. And people have to start recognizing that they can't pay more attention to their next oil change in their vehicle and absolve themselves of home maintenance. This is a health issue. What is it that you said? We have built our homes perfectly.
We've tightened our homes with deadly precision.
Thank you. I mean, most people every 3,000 miles, whether you need it or not, oil change. And yet nobody looks under the kitchen cabinet. Nobody cleans. Nobody this. Nobody looks at what is air purification. All these things you're talking about. Well, the time has come when those days have to be an historic event for us living in a built environment, because the built environment translates into the built microbiome. This is an aspect of risk mitigation.
That's right. Well, and that's a wonderful place to be, where we're in a situation where we can help lots of people improve the way they live indoors. We don't often think about how much nutrition we get from the air we breathe, but it's significant, and we need to do what we can do to protect ourselves from the contaminants that are out there lurking around, as it were. So I want to thank you guys for being here tonight. Thank you so much. Hope this was good for you. We'll look forward to seeing you next Tuesday night. Thank you, Nathan. Thank you, Skip. And we'll be talking soon.
Thank you, everyone.
See ya.